They had promised me spring. That was the word Anna used on the phone, as if it were a season you could circle on a calendar. Spring will be your time, Mom, she said. All light and sugar, back in January when the air still bit through the window panes. We'll do something special. After everything, just wait for spring. And so I did. I started watching the calendar the way I used to wait for the first crocus when Michael was alive. I circled Easter, drew a small tulip on the square that marked my birthday. The winter was cold this year. The kind of cold that creeps into your joints and forgets to leave. But I wore it like a waiting room coat. Because spring would come. My spring. My son had promised. I know what you might be thinking. That it's foolish, at my age, to still get excited about promises. But no one tells you that hope doesn't go away with wrinkles. It just gets quieter, like a radio in another room. I started saving small things. A pale pink scarf I saw on sale and told myself I'd wear on the big day, whatever it turned out to be. A lipstick I hadn't worn since Michael's funeral. Soft coral, almost cheerful. I even had a pair of cream shoes I'd only worn once, kept in their box like a secret. They made my ankles ache a bit, but I figured I wouldn't need to stand too long. Maybe it would be a brunch or a family picnic in the park, like the ones we used to do when Anna was new and nervous and still learning how we all fit together. I remember baking cinnamon scones for that first family outing with her. She'd offered to bring store-bought croissants, but I smiled and waved her off. There's nothing like the smell of cinnamon on a breezy day, I told her, and I was right. The smell did carry. Even the bees seemed to agree. But now, 10 years later, the cinnamon stayed in its jar. I waited instead. I started tidying the house in small doses. Nothing major, just enough to make the dining room feel like it remembered guests. I polished the silverware I rarely used, even though I knew they preferred takeout most days. I brushed the curtains near the window that faces the dogwood tree, the one Michael planted the year Daniel was born. Its branches had been bare for months, but I kept glancing at them, willing them to bloom. I kept expecting something in the mail. A card, a printed invitation, with butterflies and Anna's tidy handwriting. Maybe even a note from Daniel. He used to draw me pictures with sticky hands and bright crayons, telling me I was the best grandma muffin in the world. That's what he used to call me after I once baked blueberry muffins shaped like little owls. I still have one of those drawings, framed in the hallway. It's faded now, but I still pause in front of it some days. By March, I had bought a gift. Not for me, for Anna. I saw a delicate porcelain pie dish in the shape of a daisy. Something about it reminded me of how she used to bake lemon pies when she and Daniel were first married. She doesn't bake much anymore, but I thought maybe, if spring really was going to be my time, I could give it to her, a quiet peace offering. I even tied it with a ribbon and tucked it into the top shelf of the pantry so it wouldn't be in the way. Weeks went by. I watched the frost melt from the hedges, the mornings brighten, the birds return, and I kept waiting. Every time the phone rang, I'd wipe my hands on a towel and answer like I hadn't been holding my breath. Sometimes it was the pharmacy. Once, it was a wrong number, asking for Miss Tammy. But most times, it was no one. I did get a text from Daniel in early April. It said, "Hey Mom, hope you're good. Things are a bit hectic. We'll call soon." There was a smiley face at the end. One of those typed ones, with the little colon and parentheses. It looked like it had been added out of habit. Still, I saved it. I thought maybe they were planning something. A surprise. Maybe they didn't want to spoil it. I know Anna likes to be in control of things. Dinner parties, outfits, even what shoes I should wear to Daniel's graduation. She once told me lightly, "You always want to look like part of the group, don't you?" I'd nodded, even though I wasn't sure what that meant. I figured maybe they were planning a trip, a weekend away, just us. Maybe even Daniel's new daughter Zoe would be there. I haven't seen her in months, not since the christening where Anna made me sit behind the buffet table so the photos wouldn't be too crowded. I didn't say anything. I just held the gift I had brought, a small embroidered blanket with Zoe's name on it, and folded it back into the bag after the ceremony. But spring came, and nothing came with it. No brunch, no party, no special outing. Easter passed, and I made an apple tart for myself, the kind Michael liked. I lit a candle and ate one slice with tea, then put the rest in the fridge. It stayed there for days. I threw it out when it started to soften and collapse at the edges. On my birthday, I got a call from my neighbor Fran. She's 81 and keeps more energy in her bones than I do most days. She asked if I wanted to join her for a walk. I said no, that I was expecting something. I didn't say what. By evening, I had turned the porch light on twice. I sat by the front window. I wore the coral lipstick. I even placed the pink scarf near the door. Nothing came. No call, no knock, no Daniel. At 10:14 p.m., I got a message from Anna. Just 2 words, "Happy birthday." No emoji, no name. I stared at the screen for a long time. Something small slipped in me then. Not a break. Not yet. Just a shift. Like a table leg wobbling. Something I hadn't noticed was uneven before. I didn't cry. I didn't text back. I just turned off the porch light, wiped the coral from my mouth, and folded the scarf neatly on the chair. I think I knew then, even if I didn't want to say it out loud. Hope doesn't always leave in one great gust. Sometimes it's chipped away, like paint on an old fence, flaking slowly, unkindly, until one day the wind rushes through and you realize it was never strong enough to hold anything. But still, I waited. Not for a party anymore. Not even for spring. Just for something. Anything. A sign that I wasn't being erased one day at a time. And I told myself they're just busy. Everyone's busy these days, with work and Zoe and life. It's not personal. Maybe next week, maybe next month. I told myself all the things women tell themselves when they don't want to believe the silence has meaning. But I could feel it. The warmth was still in the air. Yes, the dogwood had started to bloom, but the season that had been promised to me, it wasn't mine. Not anymore. The first thing to fade was the ringing. Not all at once, just fewer calls. Then longer silences between them. A week, then 2. Then sorry, it's been crazy, followed by nothing at all. I used to answer on the first ring. That's how I was raised. My mother always said it was polite, that the phone should never feel ignored. But now, sometimes I let it ring. I'd stare at the screen and wait to see if it was one of them. It rarely was. Once, it was Zoe tapping at the buttons and accidentally FaceTiming me. I saw her face for a fleeting second, a smudge of peanut butter on her cheek, the crown of her curls. She giggled at the screen like it was a toy, and then Anna appeared in the background, and she ended the call without a word. No call back, no explanation. Just a window slammed shut before I could even wave. I told myself I must have imagined the look on her face. Dismissive. Cold. Like I was a bug that had landed on her picnic. Still, I waited a few days and texted. "Tell Zoe Grandma Muffin says hello." No reply. I sat on the edge of my bed that night and stared at my slippers. They were old, worn soft around the toes, but dependable. I had bought them just after Michael passed, during one of those long, quiet weeks when going to the store felt like an adventure. They were pink with little bows. I remember Daniel teasing me about them once, calling me his cozy-footed superhero. That was years ago. Now even the teasing had gone quiet. I tried calling Daniel once. Just once after my birthday. I kept my voice light, cheerful, the way mothers are trained to do, even when their stomachs are full of stones. He picked up on the 4th ring. "Hey Mom," he said, breathless. "Everything okay?" "I was just checking in," I said. "Wanted to hear your voice." "Oh," he said. "Sorry, things are. We've just been running around non-stop." I could hear Zoe in the background, calling for something. Anna's voice followed, sharp and clipped. Daniel lowered the phone, muffled something, then came back. "Can I call you back later?" he asked. I nodded. though he couldn't see me. Of course, he never did. I didn't call again. I began keeping a list. Not on paper. I didn't want to look pathetic, but in my mind, a quiet inventory of absences. No invite to Zoe's ballet recital. No call on Mother's Day. No reply when I sent a video of the garden blooming. Even the photo I mailed of Michael's old chair, refinished by hand and ready for the porch, went unanswered. They were slipping away, inch by inch, like fog rolling off the ocean. But I still tried. I baked the banana bread Anna once said she liked. I wrapped it in wax paper and walked it over. Her car was in the driveway. I knocked twice. Through the frosted glass, I heard movement. A pause. Then silence. I waited 5 minutes. Maybe more. No one opened the door. I left the bread on the porch and walked home slowly, telling myself they must have been in the back or on a call, that they'd thank me later. They didn't. The next week, I saw the bread in the outside trash bin, unopened. The wax paper, untouched, still folded like I'd done it at the kitchen counter. It sat there between a pizza box and a bundle of junk mail. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the empty teacup I'd forgotten to rinse. The house creaked around me, old wood settling, the refrigerator humming. I remembered a time when the house used to echo with Daniel's voice, when he'd rush in from school and toss his backpack on the floor, asking what was for dinner. Back then, silence was rare. Now it was a second skin. Even my neighbor Fran noticed. She leaned over the fence one morning while watering her marigolds. "Haven't seen Daniel around lately," she said. "Everything okay?" I smiled. Lied. Said he was traveling for work. That Anna was busy with Zoe's new school. That they were just stretched thin. I must have sounded convincing, because Fran nodded and offered me a daffodil clipping. I thanked her and placed it in an old mug near the window. It wilted within 2 days. I started talking to Michael more. Not out loud, not always, but in the quiet ways you speak to someone you've loved and lost. I'd sit on the porch in his chair, watch the street, and say in my mind, "What would you do, Mike? Am I being too soft, too hopeful?" He never answered, of course, but somehow, those silent conversations felt more satisfying than the hollow ones I tried to have with Daniel. I remembered a time when we all laughed together. When Anna brought over scrapbooks of their honeymoon, and we sat around the kitchen table flipping through photos of waterfalls and gondolas. Daniel had kissed her cheek in every picture. She'd blushed and told me I'd always have a place in their lives. She said, "You're not just his mother, you're mine too now." I believed her. I even wrote it down once, in the blank space of an old recipe card. It felt too tender to say aloud. That little moment had been enough to make me feel woven into something. But those threads unraveled without ceremony. Now whenever I dropped off anything, a jar of homemade jam, a bag of garden herbs, a book I thought Zoe would love, it stayed unacknowledged. Sometimes I wasn't even sure if they noticed. It felt like I was writing letters to a locked door. One evening in May, I walked over with a tin of oatmeal cookies. The lights were on. I heard laughter from inside. For a moment I smiled. Then I paused. There was another voice. Lighter, younger. Someone was visiting. Another woman. And then I heard Anna's voice say, "Just ignore it." Probably her again. A laugh followed. The tin slipped in my hand. I caught it before it hit the step. I placed it down gently and left. I didn't look back. That night I folded towels for no reason. Just to feel useful. Just to feel like something still needed me. I placed them neatly on the shelf and sat down at the kitchen table. I didn't cry. I just stared at my hands. They looked older than I remembered. Spotted. Softer. Still capable of holding things, of carrying love, but no longer invited to do so. I brewed tea. Didn't drink it. Just let it go cold beside the burner. There's a strange grief in being erased while still standing in the room. like watching your own reflection fade from the mirror before you've even walked away. But I wasn't ready to call it betrayal yet. Not then. I still believed, or maybe hoped, that they'd come around. That something had just gotten in the way. Stress, schedules, or misunderstanding. I even told myself, you're imagining it. You're sensitive. Don't make a fuss. I repeated the things I've heard women whisper to themselves for generations. I believed I was still needed, still welcome, still seen. But doubt had already moved in. It lived in the pauses, in the empty inbox, in the untouched banana bread, and the birthday that passed like smoke. I just hadn't named it yet. I still had hope, but it was wearing thinner by the day. The truth came quietly. Not in a blow or a letter, but in pixels, a photo. A moment I wasn't supposed to see. It was Fran who showed it to me. Not with malice, no, just one of those idle, innocent shares between neighbors. We'd both been sitting on her porch with lemon water in our hands and the afternoon sun curling over the hedges like spilled honey. Her great niece had posted pictures from a recent trip, Fran said, and she scrolled through her phone with cheerful thumbs and squinted eyes. There's my Abby. Oh, and that's her little boy at the aquarium. They went with friends last weekend. Oh, look at that jellyfish display. Wait. She paused, tilted the phone. Oh, isn't that Daniel? My heart hiccuped. I leaned closer. There, in sharp detail, was my son. Daniel, holding Zoe's hand. Smiling, mid-laugh, wearing the blue checked shirt I'd bought him for last Christmas, the one he said he'd save for a good day. Behind him stood Anna, hair braided neatly, sunglasses perched on her head. And beside her, smiling into the lens with a hand resting on Anna's shoulder, was a woman I didn't recognize, younger than me, comfortable, present, and in the caption nestled between emojis and hashtags, Family Day at Ocean Park with these wonderful people, Baum. Bassett. My people. My people. That's what it said. I didn't say anything to Fran. I just smiled, like the air hadn't been knocked out of me, like my chest wasn't folding inward. That's so nice, I murmured. He looks happy. Fran nodded. Nice to see them getting out as a family again. I excused myself a few minutes later. Back in my kitchen, I stared at the fridge door like it could answer me. There were still old photos stuck there, with mismatched magnets. Daniel as a toddler holding a juice box. A crayon drawing from Zoe, half faded. Anna at their wedding holding her bouquet like it was made of gold. I stood there, hand still on the doorknob, and realized something with a kind of aching clarity. I hadn't seen them in person in 3 months. 3 months. Not even a drive-by. Not even a thought we'd swing past. Nothing. And yet here they were, smiling at an aquarium, posing for someone else's camera, wrapped in the warmth of a day I hadn't been invited to witness. I opened my phone, scrolled through my texts. Nothing from Daniel since that brief "hope you're good" in April. No call logs, not even a voicemail. I checked his Facebook page. Public updates were rare, but there was one from 2 days ago. Grateful for chosen family. What a weekend. It hit like a bruise you didn't know was there until someone pressed it. I clicked through the photos, one after another, moments. Anna laughing with the mystery woman. Zoe on someone else's shoulders, Daniel and Anna holding hands. Each picture was framed with the kind of intimacy I once thought was mine. But I wasn't in a single frame. Not even mentioned. No tags. No comment. No emoji beside my name. I wasn't just missing. I was erased. That night I sat in the dark and listened to the tick of the kitchen clock. I had made soup, but didn't eat it. I poured it out, quietly, as though noise would expose something. I opened the cabinet where I kept the photo albums. Not digital. The old kind. Leather-bound, pages thick with glue and effort. I turned each page like it was glass. There we were. Me, Daniel, Anna. A younger version of the life I'd built. Vacations. Birthdays. Zoe's first wobbly steps. Even the day they moved into their new house, the one I helped them put the down payment on. I remembered the conversation clearly. "We're just a little short," Daniel had said. "But if we can get past this last hurdle, the bank's approved everything. It's our dream house, Mom." And of course, I said yes. Without hesitation. I even wrote the check by hand, smiled through the lump in my throat as Anna hugged me and called me our guardian angel. They promised I'd always have a room there, that I'd be part of everything, that Zoe would grow up knowing how deeply she was loved. But now I couldn't even remember the color of that room. Had I ever truly been inside it? I opened my banking app. It was something I rarely did unless a bill needed paying or Fran's daughter needed help figuring out her garden supplies reimbursement. There it was. I scrolled through statements. Grocery store charges I didn't recognize, a restaurant receipt from the weekend of the aquarium trip. 2 adults, 1 child, and a 4th itemized entry. The account they used, the one I'd given them shared access to, still had my name on it. But I wasn't the one spending. A quiet rage unspooled in my chest. Not fire, not thunder, just a cold, settled kind. The kind that doesn't need to be loud to be dangerous. I clicked through the transactions. Boutique purchases, spa bookings, a hotel stay dated the same weekend as Family Day. My fingers hovered. I searched Anna's Instagram. There she was, lounging in a spa robe, feet soaking in a basin of lavender water, captioned, "Self-care weekend with my people." I was not her people. I clicked her bio. There it was, mother, wife, friend. Found family matters most. Found family. The phrase echoed, as if I'd been misplaced. Left somewhere, like a coat someone no longer wanted to carry. I closed the phone and sat there in silence. The house seemed to notice. The kettle didn't fume. The lights buzzed faintly, like they too had grown tired of waiting. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the card I had written weeks ago, the one I planned to give Anna with the daisy pie dish. I had written, in my neatest cursive, "I'm grateful to be part of your family. Thank you for keeping me close." I tore it in half, then in half again. I placed the pieces gently in the bin. And still, I didn't cry. Because sometimes the heart doesn't break like glass. It settles, quietly, into new shapes. The next morning I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called a lawyer, not to make threats, just to ask quiet, clear questions about account access, about ownership, about what it meant to give and what it meant to take back. He was kind, patient, asked nothing I couldn't answer. And when I hung up, I stood in the middle of the kitchen and whispered a sentence I hadn't allowed myself to think before. They don't love me anymore. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't shouted. It just was. I went to the mirror and looked at myself. The pink scarf I had once reserved for a promised spring was still folded neatly on the hook. I took it down, wrapped it once around my neck, and stared at the woman staring back. She looked older. Yes. But not weak, not broken, just done. I didn't plan it like a war. It was just a Sunday. There was laundry on the line. The garden needed watering. And yet there I was, sitting in my good coat, the one with the deep pockets, waiting in my own living room, like a guest in someone else's house, waiting for Daniel to keep the one promise he still hadn't broken, that he would stop by to fix the loose fence panel. He'd said it quickly, almost as an afterthought. In a rare call 2 days earlier, I'd said thank you. I didn't tell him I planned to be ready. I didn't tell him I had something to say. He arrived, an hour late. His car pulled up, humming that low, lazy tune it always did. I watched from behind the curtain, that old floral one he once helped me hang, back when he still carried a toolbox without prompting. He stepped out, looked at his phone before the house, didn't knock. Just opened the side gate like he belonged to the place. I stepped out onto the porch. "Daniel." He turned, surprised, blinked like I'd stepped out of a dream. "Oh, hey, Mom." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "You said you'd come by to fix the fence," I said. He nodded. "Yeah, I've got the drill in the car. Shouldn't take long. That's fine, but I need a word first. He shifted on his feet. Okay. Sure. I gestured toward the chairs on the porch. The ones Michael and I used to drink tea in before the world got too quiet. He sat slowly. I sat beside him. The wind was still. A single bird chirped, then stopped. I saw the pictures, I said. He turned to look at me. I kept my gaze steady. The ones from the aquarium. Anna, Zoe, you, and someone else. He blinked. Mom, I wasn't mentioned. Not once. He opened his mouth, closed it again. I waited. He looked away. It was just a casual outing, not planned. I let that hang in the air like wet laundry that would never dry. And the restaurant? The hotel? The joint account? The spa days paid for with my name on the bank statements? His cheeks flushed. It's not what you think. I shook my head slowly. It never is. Not until it is. He ran a hand through his hair. That nervous tic he inherited from Michael. Anna said it was okay, he mumbled. She said you probably didn't want to come. I turned to him fully then. My voice didn't rise. Not once. I spent 3 months waiting for a spring you promised me. I bought a scarf. I made room in my week. I waited by the door like an old dog who doesn't know she's been abandoned. Mom, don't. You didn't forget me, I said, and the words came like frost. You replaced me. He looked down at his shoes. I saw the caption, Daniel, my people. That's what Anna wrote. He didn't argue. That hurt more than anything else. And when I dropped off bread, when I knocked on the door, and someone laughed and said just ignore it, that was Anna too, wasn't it? He rubbed his temples. She's just been tense. With Zoe, with everything. I raised you to be kind. I whispered. Not cowardly. He looked at me then. Really looked. For the first time in months. Maybe years. And then like a knife made of sugar. He said, You've been dramatic, Mom. My breath caught. He said it like it was nothing. Like it was a favor. An explanation meant to soothe. You take things too personally, he added. Anna just needs space. And sometimes you make it hard to relax. You're always dropping by or texting or leaving things on the porch. They were gifts. But it's too much, he said. It's like you don't know when to stop. Too much. That was the phrase. The verdict. He didn't see me as loving, or loyal, or generous. Just too much. I stood up slowly. My knees ached, but I didn't show it. I wiped your nose when you were sick. I sold my jewelry for your tuition. I buried your father while holding your hand. And now, I'm too much. He stood too. Mom, that's not what I meant. No, I said. It's exactly what you meant. You just didn't expect me to listen. He looked pained. Maybe he meant to. Maybe it was real. I never asked for your money, he offered weakly. But you took it, I said, and you used it to build a life I wasn't welcome in. He looked away again. He looked away, and then, as if to seal it, as if to twist the knife just that little bit more, he said, Anna thinks it's better if we take some space. Just for now. There it was. The exile. Stamped and signed. I took a breath. Not because I was about to cry, but because I felt something loosen in me. Snap free, like a thread that had pulled too tight for too long. Space, I repeated. He nodded. Just to give everyone a little room. I smiled. Then, just a flicker. The kind that holds 1,000 unsaid things. All right, I said. You'll have it. He looked unsure. You're not upset? Oh, I'm heartbroken, I said plainly, but not surprised. I turned and opened the screen door. He followed me inside, maybe expecting tea or a kind word or a peace offering, but I held the door open without stepping through. You can fix the fence if you like, I said. But after today, I think it's best we both respect the space you asked for. He stood there, hands in his pockets, and then he nodded. He left without another word. I didn't watch him go. Instead, I walked to the drawer where I kept the old recipe cards. I pulled out the one that still had Anna's handwriting on it, a lemon pie recipe we made once together. She'd written, "For our sweet Sundays, with love." I tore it slowly. Not with rage, with ceremony. Then I folded the pieces and placed them in the tin where I kept expired coupons and things I once thought were worth saving. And in that moment, I finally saw what had been staring at me for years. They never saw me as a person, only as an obligation, a chore, a fading photograph on the wall. Anna had called me dramatic. Daniel said I was too much. But the truth was simpler than all that. I was inconvenient. And when people decide you're inconvenient, they write you out of the story with a pen you paid for. That night, I called the lawyer again. Not to ask questions, to give instructions. And I slept. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Because I knew, deep in my bones, that the next chapter of my life would no longer include people who saw me as a shadow in their living room. I was done being invisible. They wanted space. They were about to see just how much space I could give. The lawyer's office smelled like old wood and lemon oil. There was a calmness in the way the light fell through the blinds, gentle and striped, like a quiet hand on my shoulder. The man across the desk, Mr. Halberd, had been handling my affairs since Michael passed. We weren't close, but he always offered me tea, and he always listened like what I said mattered. That morning, I told him I wanted to update my will. He didn't flinch, just clicked his pen and nodded. I passed him a page I'd written in my own hand, my instructions, names crossed out, a few added, a small foundation I wanted to create in Michael's name, a community garden for widows with benches and quiet corners, and a lemon tree, if the soil allowed. I don't want Daniel or Anna to have any claim to the house, the funds, or my possessions, I said calmly. And your granddaughter? He asked gently. I paused. My throat tightened. I'll leave her something, I said. A letter. A choice. But not through them. He nodded. We worked in silence after that. When I stepped back outside, the air felt different. I carried no bags, no gifts, only a sealed envelope with new documents inside. It wasn't revenge. It was removal. I walked to the bakery afterward, the one 2 streets over that still sold fresh jam rolls on Tuesdays. I hadn't bought myself one in years. They'd always been for Daniel, or Michael, or wrapped in napkins for Zoe's lunchbox. But that day, I asked for 2, one to eat on the bench out front, one to save for later. I sat with the sun on my back and watched the world go by. No one called me. No one needed anything. For once I was just a woman eating a jam roll on a Tuesday. And that was enough. Back at home, I opened the linen closet. The good towels were still there, unused. I took them out, ran a warm wash, and folded them again. This time not for guests, not to impress Anna, just for myself. I began reclaiming things, slowly. I changed the locks, not because I feared them, but because I realized I no longer trusted them with keys. I emptied the second bedroom, the one they always called Zoe's room, and turned it into a space of my own. I moved Michael's old books in there, added a small record player, a comfortable chair with arms wide enough to hold a mug, a journal, and sometimes, if I felt brave, my feet. I unsubscribed from their updates, blocked their numbers from my landline, turned off notifications. The silence that followed wasn't cold, it was clean. Like a house freshly dusted, windows open, everything breathing again. I even sold the daisy pie dish. A woman at the church bake sale admired it. I wrapped it gently in brown paper and placed it in her hands. She said it reminded her of her mother. I told her, "Then it belongs with you." She smiled. A real one. For the first time in a long while, I felt that I had placed something, not lost it. Fran, my neighbor, noticed the shift. "You've been glowing lately," she said one morning while trimming her roses. "Have you been doing something different?" "Just gardening my life," I replied with a smile. She laughed. "Whatever it is, it suits you." I started waking up earlier. Not out of anxiety, but anticipation. I'd sit by the window with a hot mug of tea, lemon and chamomile, and write small things in a notebook. Memories, recipes, fragments of poems, sometimes just feelings that didn't need fixing. Once, I wrote, "They saw me as an echo, but I was always a voice. They just didn't listen." I didn't need anyone else to read it. It was enough that I had. I found strength in simple actions. I moved my bank accounts. Not as punishment, but protection. I consulted a new advisor, one who wore loafers with gold buckles and never interrupted when I spoke. She helped me set up new savings, secure, silent. I told her I wanted to live peacefully, not lavishly, but that I also wanted to choose where my kindness went. She said that's the most powerful kind of wealth. I nodded. She understood. I took the old family photo down from the hallway, the one from the year Zoe was born, where we all smiled, but Anna's eyes looked elsewhere. I wrapped it in newspaper and put it in the attic. I replaced it with a framed botanical print I found in a thrift shop for $2, a sprig of rosemary captioned, "Remembrance, not regret." It suited me better. People in town started seeing me differently, too. Not as someone's mother. Not as a widow, just as me. I helped Fran at the church one afternoon, folding hymnals, arranging teacups for the monthly gathering. A younger woman asked if I wanted to join the book circle. I hesitated, then said yes. The first meeting was in someone's sunroom, with mismatched chairs and warm banana bread. We read a novel about a woman who walks away from everything and builds a life out of what's left. I didn't say much during the discussion, but I nodded a lot. I understood her. One day, I passed Daniel and Anna in the grocery store. They didn't see me, or maybe they did, and pretended otherwise. He was laughing about something. Daniel had his hand on her back. Zoe was not with them. I didn't flinch. I walked down the opposite aisle, picked up a jar of fig preserves and kept going. I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. That evening, I donated half my old china to a local women's shelter, not out of bitterness, but because I no longer needed table settings for people who never showed up. I kept 2 plates. One for me, one, maybe for a friend. I wrote a letter to Zoe. I didn't send it. Not yet. But I wrote it. I told her that she came from strength. That her grandmother once folded too many napkins, waited too long at too many windows, but that she learned that silence can be power. That distance can be healing. I told her I loved her, and that if she ever wanted to find me, the real me, I'd be here, with the rosemary, and the tea, and a jam roll waiting. I tucked the letter into a linen pouch and placed it in a locked drawer, just in case, because you never know when truth will be needed more than legacy. The last thing I did that week was take down the sticky note I'd kept on my fridge for years. It said, "Don't forget to check in on them." I replaced it with one that said, "Check in on yourself." And every morning since, I have. Sometimes with tea, sometimes with stillness, but always, always with clarity. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't too much. I was simply someone who gave everything. And now, I was giving myself back to myself. The first message came on a Thursday. Just a single line from Daniel. "Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay?" I stared at it for a long time. The screen lit up my face in the quiet, late afternoon light, my tea going cold beside me. He used to call me Mom. Now it was just hey. There was no warmth behind it. No apology. Just a poke to see if I still existed, if I could still be summoned when needed. I didn't answer. I didn't need to anymore. That was the start of it. The part where they began to notice the space they had demanded was in fact a canyon. A week later, Anna called. I didn't recognize the number at first. She used a different phone, but her voice was unmistakable, sharp, and slightly forced, like someone trying to make a smile fit where it doesn't belong. "Hi. Just checking in," she said after a pause. "We were wondering if you're All right. Zoe asked about you. I didn't believe that. Not anymore. Still, I listened to the message all the way through. She ended with call us when you can. I didn't. Instead, I walked into my garden and sat on the bench. Michael and I had placed there one spring afternoon, 2 decades ago. Back then it had been his idea, a quiet corner surrounded by lavender and sage. He said every home needed one place where you could hear your own thoughts. Mine had been drowned out for so long. Now they came back, clear and strong. The next call came from an unknown number. I let it ring, then another, then a message from Daniel again. I know things have been weird. Can we talk? Weird talk. As though years of exclusion and silence could be summed up in one soft word. I deleted the message. There was no anger in me. Not anymore. No frantic breath, no stomach twist. Just calm. I was becoming very good at that. I turned off voicemail, removed the family email from my inbox, locked my accounts, changed the passwords to the ones only I would remember. Pieces of poems, lines from my own life, fragments no one else had ever cared to ask about. I even changed my number. Fran asked me if I was going away when she saw the moving truck pull up to the curb. Just a little, I said. Far enough. She looked worried at first. You're not being pushed out, are you? No, I said. I'm stepping out. She smiled then. A quiet, understanding one. Good, she said. It's about time. I'd found a small cottage a few towns over, tucked behind an old library and a bakery that smelled of warm butter and real vanilla. It had 1 bedroom, a small garden, and a clawfoot tub that I fell in love with instantly. The wallpaper in the kitchen was peeling slightly, and there was a cupboard that creaked when it opened, like it had secrets. It was perfect. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell Anna. They didn't ask. I left the house keys with the lawyer, tucked the new address into the will, and placed a final envelope in my desk drawer, labeled plainly, for when they finally noticed. Inside was a letter, not cruel, not bitter, just the truth. In my own handwriting. You asked for space. I gave it to you. You called me dramatic. I became quiet. You pretended I wasn't there. So I let you live that reality. And then at the bottom, in the tiniest script I could manage, don't look for me with guilt. Look in the mirror and find the silence you left me in. I packed what I needed. 2 suitcases, 1 box of books, a photo of Michael, and a red cardigan I hadn't worn since our last holiday together. The rest I gave away. Letting go wasn't difficult, because most of it had already been taken. The hardest part was leaving Zoe's blanket, the one I had embroidered myself. It still smelled faintly of baby powder and hope, but I left it, because when a mother is erased, her memories become artifacts, and I no longer needed to archive pain. The day I left, the sky was soft with clouds, not stormy, just undecided. The kind of sky that lets you go gently. I closed the front door without looking back. The driver of the moving van asked if I was starting over. No, I said. Just starting alone. He nodded, as though he understood. I moved in silence, unpacked in silence, breathed in a room that had never heard my name spoken in contempt. At night, I lit a candle and watched the shadows move against the walls. I made soup and ate it slowly, letting each spoonful remind me that nourishment can be gentle too. The calls didn't stop. Not right away. They escalated. Texts from Daniel asking where I was. Messages with "we're worried." A sudden voicemail that Anna left, clipped and tight. You're being unfair. You don't just disappear from your own family. Zoe needs to see you. This isn't okay. But they hadn't said that when I sat alone on my birthday, or when I left bread on their porch and heard them laugh behind the door. I let the message sit in my inbox until the screen timed out. Then I erased it. A few days later, Fran sent me a letter. A real one, written in blue ink and full of news about the garden club and the church's latest bake sale. She said people were asking where I'd gone. I told them you went where the peace was. That made me cry. But softly, I placed her letter beside my kettle, folded gently, like something sacred, and I continued my quiet vanishing. Not as punishment, not as a game, but as a reclamation. You see, vanishing doesn't mean you don't exist. It means you've stepped out of the role they wrote for you without your consent. It means you've burned the script they kept handing you, the one where you were the background, the burden, the afterthought. It means you've chosen to be whole, even if it means being alone. And so I wake now with no alarms. I water my garden with hands that no longer tremble. I write letters I don't send, bake scones for myself, and listen to music at full volume without worrying who it bothers. I've disappeared from their lives, but I've reappeared in my own. And that is the most honest kind of revenge. 1 year later, spring arrived with no fanfare. No one circled it on a calendar for me. No promises were made. No phone calls hovered with hints of invitations. And yet, it bloomed. The rosemary in my garden stood tall and fragrant. The lilac bush behind the cottage cracked open with slow grace. Bees wandered lazily between blossoms like they had nowhere to be but here. And for once, neither did I. I woke to sunlight warming the tips of my toes through the cotton sheets. The only sound was bird song and the faint rustle of wind through the lace curtains. I brewed tea, real tea, loose leaf, with lemon peel and a splash of honey, and carried it to the back steps. There, I sat with my knees covered by a quilt I'd sewn myself, sipping slowly, watching nothing in particular. It was, in many ways, everything. I was no longer waiting. Not for a phone call. Not for redemption. Not for them. My days belonged to me now. Sometimes I helped at the library down the road, shelved books, watered the potted fern near the window, recommended novels to passing strangers. The librarian, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and laugh lines, once told me, "You feel like someone who remembers every word they've read." I told her, "That's because I used to be the page no one noticed." She smiled. I think she understood. Other days I cooked, not for others, not to impress, just for joy. I learnt new recipes, I burned a few. I created my own spice mix and labeled it Quiet Thunder. It tasted of clove, orange peel, and something you couldn't quite name, like memory. I filled notebooks, not journals, just fragments, sentences, colors, small observations, a daisy growing in gravel, a boy helping his father fix a bike chain, a woman in a blue coat who paused at my gate but didn't knock. Sometimes I wrote letters to Michael. I knew he wasn't anywhere I could mail them, but still, I wrote, "You'd be proud of me today." I told him once. I remembered who I am. Not a placeholder, not a shadow, a whole person. Even one afternoon, while rearranging a shelf, I found an old scarf I'd nearly forgotten, the pale pink one I'd once planned to wear for a spring that never came. I wrapped it around my shoulders. It fit better now, like it had been waiting for me to become the woman who could wear it without needing to be seen. And then just when I had stopped needing anything, there was a knock on the door. It was timid, unsure. 3 soft taps. I opened it slowly. Zoe stood there, taller, her hair longer. She held a small paper bag in one hand, crumpled slightly at the top. Her eyes were wide, green like Daniel's, but gentler. She said hi. My heart didn't leap. It simply opened, quietly. I nodded. "Hello." She offered the bag. "I made these in home ec," she said. "They're kind of lumpy, but I thought maybe you'd want some." I opened the bag. Inside were misshapen scones, cinnamon. From the smell of them, I looked at her. "You remembered?" She shrugged. "I always did. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just sat, eventually on the steps, 2 scones between us. 2 cups of tea. I brewed without asking how she took hers. I remembered. We talked about school, about her favorite teacher, about how Anna didn't like her baking because it made a mess. And then, very softly, Zoe said, "They said you didn't want to see us." I stared ahead at the garden. "No," I said. "They said I wasn't worth seeing." She looked down. "I didn't know who to believe," she said. "That's okay," I told her. "Sometimes we grow into truth." She stayed for an hour. When she left, she didn't promise to come back. And I didn't ask her to. Because closure isn't a reunion, it's a release. A week later, a letter came from Daniel. I recognized the writing instantly. I didn't open it, not because I was angry, but because I didn't need the words anymore. They could not undo what was done, and I had finally learned the power of silence. I placed the letter in a box in the back of the closet, the one with old photos, faded recipes, and the life I used to fight for. It sat beside my past, where it belonged. Sometimes people say forgive and forget, but I believe in something quieter. Remember and reclaim. Because what they took from me, the warmth, the space, the belonging, I have now built for myself, brick by brick, day by day. They said I was dramatic. I became steady. They said I was too much. I learned how to pour just enough. They said, "Let's pretend she's not here." So I left, and in doing so, I found a life that doesn't need pretending, doesn't beg for permission, doesn't wait for applause. I feed myself. I keep the lights on. I write poems no one sees. And I wake each morning knowing I am real, I am enough, I am here. Even if they aren't, even if they never look for me, I have found what matters. A home that holds peace, a silence that sings, and a self that will not vanish again. Final line. I disappeared from their lives, but I appeared, finally, in my own.